What's up, guys? We are back with another Black Series archive review, taking a look at my personal most anticipated figure. I know Anakin is kind of the big one when it comes to this wave, but this figure in particular is special to me because I do not have an opened copy of this figure. So today we're taking a look at Darth Maul. And I do have Darth Maul. I've had him since he came out way back in, 2013, because it says that on the back of the package. But that was during a time when I wasn't actively opening Black Series, and I ended up getting the one and only version of him that I ever got, signed by Ray Park, so it is entombed in the package forever. And I've never opened or even handled an open Black Series Darth Maul. So this one is kind of interesting for me personally. So let's take a look and dig in. We've got him here in the standard archive packaging, so carded release, not box. You've got him there in the window with some artwork down there in the corner, and then the back has more of that artwork, a shot of the original package, the information of when he originally came out, as well as a bio. So let's do it. Let's pull this guy out and take a look for the first time. And here he is out of the package, Darth Maul himself. Again, this is a figure that I am personally very much interested in digging into, just because I've had one sitting on my shelf for about 6 years now and have never gotten to play around with him. So I'm very excited for this one because I know he's a solid figure, and I'm just curious how much I'm going to like him. So we've got him here in, I guess, the standard configuration. So this is how he comes out of the package, and we'll talk about some changes to him as well, because there's definitely some things you can do with this one. So we'll start with articulation, and it has to be noted for maybe the uninitiated, these outer robes are not a part of the figure. They are a separate piece, but they are a part of the head. So the head is attached to the hood, which is this entire outer robe section. So it definitely will hinder articulation. So he can look up, really not at all. He can look down slightly, and then he can return to neutral. You can swivel his head a little bit, but it really is not going to do much just because there's so much plastic sitting around his head. This is really meant for a specific look, and I'm sure, like me, a lot of folks probably don't display him this way because, frankly, I want to get to what's underneath. The arms can go out. They can still go out pretty far, but they're going to be hindered by the outer sleeve of this robe that sits over top. There is rotation at the shoulder, but of course that's hindered. You've got rotation and single joint at the elbow, hinge and rotation at the wrist. You've got a diaphragm cut here, so he can go backwards and forwards, side to side, and then rotate. And then the legs can go forward, they can go backwards a little bit. You do have a thigh cut. You've got your double jointed knees, and then you have got your rocker and hinge down there at the ankle. And once we get this robe off of him and, change him up a bit, we'll talk more about the rest of what he can do when you maybe have him in a different configuration. But he does move around decently enough for a figure that has a tremendous amount of plastic sitting on top of him, because this thing is beyond restrictive. It's rubbery and it's mobile, but it's also very much a hindrance at the same time. Now, when it comes to the look of this figure, we're gonna again talk about this guy kind of two different ways, because I want to get what's underneath him. But we've got mostly to talk about right now. We're going to talk about the robe. So you do have this very, very pleated, rubbery plastic outer robe, and this is obviously, his more secretive look from when he's with Darth Sidious or when he's on Tatooine, stuff like that. I don't think I'm ever going to display him like this, because just like my kind of gripe with Anakin, where I think he looks a little chunky that way, he definitely looks humongous with this thing on, and it's just really down to how it's cut and how it lays. And I'm not too sure that it's necessarily a bad thing. It's a secretive look. He's definitely covered in black, and that's all it is. It's a piece of rubbery black plastic. But at the same time, for a figure from 2013, I don't know that I would have wanted them at the time to try anything differently, because there's no way that Hasbro in 2013 would have given this guy a cloak that would have worked in any capacity. It would have likely been a complete mess. So I guess this is probably the best that they could have done at the time. I just find it very restrictive, and it's basically a big glob of plastic that sits over top of him, but of course it's attached to that head sculpt, so it's gonna be there if you want to use this kind of stoic-y expression. And now this is where one of the changes takes place for this figure, and he's maybe not as big of an example as Anakin, but Maul does employ photoreal on this face. So you mostly have it in the eyes. You can kind of see the pixelated look there a little bit. And again, I don't have the original available to compare against. It's in a case inside the box still, so it's not going to be a good way to really compare the two. But you can tell for sure that the face is slightly different here. I think the paint job is incredibly clear, very cleanly applied. There's no real issues to speak of here. The sculpt is solid. I think the head sculpt looked fine in the first place. I think this one just changes it up a little bit enough so that you can tell there is a difference, but the big thing for this figure is, of course, just being reissued. Of course, they had to employ photoreal because that's the thing now, and I think it does work well enough on this head sculpt. I just don't think this is the greatest example out of this batch. Now this is where things get really exciting for me, because this is what I want out of my Maul figure, and I'm probably not alone there. This is the most agile, the most mobile, and it just has the cooler look to me because you of course have got the fully exposed head sculpt. And I think there's a lot to like about this figure. There's a good reason why this figure was so sought after on the secondary market, why it had a very wide array of bootlegs out there. It's a nice figure. There's really nothing bad for me to say about this one. I really, really like this. I love the very, very dark sculpt on this figure. I love the different layers of black. I like the use of soft goods on this one in comparison to what I said about the Anakin figure, where I think it's okay. It's kind of odd. For some reason, this works a little better for me because you've got these strips of fabric down here that are mixed in with strips of rubbery plastic. It's a little bit more layered, and I think it works nicer for me personally. I like it. It's a little different look. You don't see it too often, but it's kind of a nice touch. And then again, the most of the figure is just cast plastic. So you've got some shiny plastics for the boots and the gloves, and then you've got a little bit of texture plastic on the what would be the kind of the outer robes of the figure, and then of course the rest is just kind of a matte black. And I think his proportions look nice. I think he looks really good. And again, since you have the different head sculpt on, that means that the robes, the outer robe, the cloak is gone. So his articulation is a little bit less hindered. So you can use this diaphragm cut a little better. He goes backwards and he goes forwards and he goes side to side really well. And of course, rotation. The arms can go all the way out here and then they can rotate all the way around. And this head sculpt has a wide range as well. So he can go up and then down and then rotate side to side. So there's a lot of movement potential with this figure, despite the fact that he still has single elbows. He definitely is more of a stoic piece when you have that other head sculpt on, and he's got a lot more dynamic potential when you've changed him up. And it's pretty obvious that that's going to be the way it is, but it's nice to see that you can use this figure in a few different ways and have two very distinct looks on your shelf. And speaking of, we have a very distinct head sculpt here as well. And of course, this is another instance where they are using photoreal. I think it's still, again, a thing that you can see mostly in the eyes, but the paint applications on this face, on this head sculpt, are fantastic. I really like everything about it. I mean, who doesn't like Darth Maul's look to begin with? It's a very iconic Star Wars thing at this point. But I mean, just look at it. The paint job is really nicely done. A lot of clean lines. There's a lot of small lines in there as well. And Hasbro's done a really good job to make this as sharp and as clean as possible. The only thing that I wish was a little different are the horns on his head are not sharp. I wish they were a little bit more pointy. I can understand why they aren't. This is a retail toy after all, so it has to conform to various safety standards. So I can understand and I can give them a pass on that, but I really wish they were a little bit sharper. But they are painted really nicely, and everything just works here. This is a great head sculpt, and again, I've been wanting to see this figure on my shelf for a very long time, so I'm maybe a little less biased than I should be here, but I think this is just a damn good figure. It's a great job, and Hasbro has done a pretty good service to this one with the upgrades to what little things they have done in terms of photoreal here. Now, as far as accessories goes, of course, we've already talked about the extra head sculpt. That's one of the big ones. But we have got his binoculars that he uses in the Phantom Menace. So you've got them here. They're just gray plastic with a little bit of yellow paint for some buttons, red paint on the top, and then some black for accents. He can surprisingly hold them pretty well close to his head. Not exactly right at his eyes, but they definitely do work pretty well. Better than I expected for a figure with only single joints at the elbows. And then, of course, we have what everybody really cares about. We've got his lightsabers. You've got two red lightsabers that can, of course, pegged together. They're keyed, so they have to go together in a certain way, and then you can put them together to make the infamous double-bladed red lightsaber. But you can also take one of them out, and this blade is in there, but it's really pegged in there good, and you can attach this guy onto his belt here, because he does have a spot for one, although it doesn't sit all that great, and he only has room for one, so you can't have both of them on there, but you've got an option if you want to do that. I'm never going to use that option, but it is indeed there. So he has a pretty good array of accessories. He has a lot more accessories than most Black Series in general, and they're all very quintessential to the entire character here. So at the end of the day, this figure is pretty fantastic. I really wish that I had had an open one already for all these years, but at the same time, it's nice to have waited this long and get some great fulfillment when it comes to opening this toy. So it's a good upgrade in some respects. It's certainly not as big of an upgrade as, say, Yoda is or Anakin in this wave, but it's a pretty good upgrade. He does, of course, have photoreal, but the big thing is for folks who don't have this figure, now is your chance. Don't hesitate. Jump on this one because you're definitely not going to be disappointed. This figure is just fantastic at a base level in terms of being an action figure, but he comes with more accessories than most Black Series figures have ever come with, and they're all pretty solid. There's really not much to gripe about with this one, outside of the fact that he does look a little chunky when he has that outer robe on, but it is a big hunk of plastic at the same time, so it's not really to be unexpected. Otherwise, though, this is a great one. It's probably the star of the wave for me personally, just because I can finally open him, but it's definitely a winner for just about anybody who wants a Darth Maul. So that's going to do it for this look at the Black Series Archive Darth Maul figure. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.